So we're going to be going into this next session, 6 Simple Steps to Homeschool Sanity by Dr. Melanie Wilson. Now, Melanie is a Christian psychologist, homeschooling mother of 6. Holy moly, that's a lot of kids there. An author who transitioned from clinical psychology career to become a leading voice in the homeschooling community, residing in Missouri with her husband of over 30 years. She's homeschooled her children for more than 20 years, with all 6 having graduated and pursued college education. Her work focuses on empowering homeschooling parents with practical tools for organization, sanity, and effective teaching, particularly through her innovative language arts curriculum.
Okay, so I titled this talk, Help, I'm Overwhelmed. The subtitle is Simple Steps to Homeschool Sanity, but the main title I took from the number of homeschooling moms who would come up to me and would use these exact words, Help, I am overwhelmed. And I can absolutely empathize with that because when I began homeschooling more than 25 years ago, we did not have as many options as homeschoolers today have. So here is an example of a rainbow resource catalog. Now, this is, you can see that it was from a number of years ago, but this thing is huge with the number of options, even back in 2012, 2013, that homeschoolers had for just curriculum. That doesn't even count all the activities and outside classes and things that we can take. When I was first in the beginning stages of homeschooling, my local support group would send out a physical 75-page single-spaced newsletter with options for me to consider for my kids. And as someone who wants to do it all, I would just be a mess. And after I would go through that whole 75-page newsletter and make decisions about each of those things, are we going to do chess club? Are we going to take swimming lessons? I would be relieved. But then the very next month, here would come another 75-page newsletter, and I would question myself, am I doing the right activities with my kids? And I finally just told some of my friends who were in the same support group, I said, if there's something awesome that I have to do, would you just tell me? Because I can't take it anymore. So if you are uncertain about what is in store for you as a new homeschooler, or because your kids are transitioning to a different stage of homeschooling, maybe they're teens and they're starting middle school for the first time, or they're starting high school, or you're wanting to get them ready for college, I want to provide you with some encouragement. With my training as a psychologist and a veteran homeschooler, I want to begin leading you to the homeschool promised land where we have some rest and some peace of mind about our homeschooling. And I have 6 simple steps to get us there. As a faith-based homeschooler, I am going to take us through the Bible's book of Exodus to find that promised land. And there are 6 steps that are outlined in that book that will apply to us as homeschoolers. If you are a secular homeschooler, then steps 2 to 6 will still apply for you. And they will absolutely apply if you have any state of overwhelm in your homeschooling. Homeschooling can be a long and difficult journey if you do not trust God as a faith-based homeschooler. Exodus 3 talks about God calling his people out of Egypt. I wrote this talk initially before the pandemic. And the pandemic, as you know, resulted in thousands of families being called out of traditional schooling. At that time, I had a neighbor who said that online schooling for her 2 young girls had been awful, but she still planned to enroll them because she just didn't think that she could handle homeschooling. I I don't know if I didn't think I could handle homeschooling, but I honestly did not want to do it. I really did not. I didn't think I would enjoy it, and I felt called. Um, and it surprises many people, but I didn't feel called as a psychologist. I had begun my profession and discovered that while I loved working as part of a team in an inpatient setting, I really didn't um, enjoy or feel fulfilled in doing one-on-one counseling. So I knew I wasn't called to do that for the rest of my career, but I felt called to be a writer and a speaker. And so when I believed that God was calling me to homeschool my children, I had three at the time. Um, I just didn't know how it was going to work with me being called to be a writer and a speaker and homeschooling too. And now, of course, the irony of it, because this is what I write and speak about, and I absolutely love it. And I have said to people many, many times, the truth is that if I had to give up writing and speaking, I had already really given up my career as a psychologist, but if I had to give those up in order to have the experience of homeschooling my children, I would have gladly done that. That is how fulfilling and wonderful homeschooling has been for me and for my family. And my kids would agree with that as well, to the point that I am hoping that I get the opportunity to help homeschool my grandkids one day. So, um, if you wonder who you are to homeschool, you have to decide if God means it when he says that he will be with us. He promises never to leave us or forsake us. He has gotten me through some really messy situations. I had a child who struggled to read phonetically. I had successfully taught my three older boys how to read using phonics. And then I had this child who just could not read, learn to read that way. And it was like this. I would say, okay, what does k say? So he would say k and then ah and then t. And even me trying to sing it to him and blend it, he still was just on k act and had no idea that this said cat. So I was pretty concerned about that. So I had that. I had a teen who rebelled and just really threw me for a loop. But the truth is that God has worked everything that, even those things that haven't gone well, together for my good, for my children's good, and even for the good of homeschoolers and future homeschoolers I talk to and encourage. And he's going to do that for you as well. If you decide that you're going to believe that God will enable you to homeschool as long as you feel called to do that, then you don't have to use a boxed curriculum or sign up for an online school from K through 12, unless that's what you really want to do. I have found that deciding whether I'm going to believe God and trust God is a daily decision, but it can be a commitment that we make right now. And if you make that commitment, you're going to save yourself so much agony. So a lot of times people will say, "Oh, what kinds of regrets do you have in your homeschooling?" And my biggest regret is not, "Oh, I wish I would have done a second math curriculum." Sorry, Dennis, but um, my biggest regret is that I that I worried about things that just worked out. The most important practice for my family's sanity then was our faith practices. And so what we did as a family is we had daily prayer. Um, the best thing that we did in that was to each go around and say what we were thankful for. And then the second thing was to say, I would have each of us say what we were sorry for. And that saved my sanity because I would just be beside myself at my kids' bad behavior when I was starting our day. There would be fighting, or there would be, chores not getting done the way they were supposed to get done. And when we would be praying together, and the kids who were misbehaving, when they would say, "Oh, I'm sorry that I mistreated my brother. I'm sorry that I was complaining," that would just melt my heart and give me the energy and the change of attitude I needed to continue my day. So, um, the next thing I would say is that recognizing that my job as a homeschooling mom was not to ensure that each of my kids was successful. That wasn't what I was called to do. I was called to be obedient to the calling, which is to teach and train my kids. And then the rest of it was up to God and my kids. And that gave me a lot of peace of mind. And then finally, I would encourage you as a faith-based homeschooler, if that's what you consider yourself to be, when you have difficulties, ask other people you trust to pray for you. It was my friends' prayers and encouragement that helped me get through a very difficult time with a child who was rebelling. So, if you do nothing else as a faith-based homeschooler to get past overwhelm, I would encourage you to commit to trusting God. The next step then is to discipline. And that word discipline really has a negative connotation, unfortunately. You probably know that the root word of discipline really means to be it has to do with learning, training. So what discipline really means is that we as parents are training through relationship. And discipline was the first lesson that I taught my kids. I found this old school, now it's old school, curriculum, a unit study curriculum called Konos, and it is still available. And we learned all about obedience by studying horses and by studying kings and queens. And it was vital for me to learn how to disciple and train my kids to be obedient, not in a like a totally subservient way, but in a respectful, honoring way, because I would not have been able to teach my kids all the other academic subjects if I couldn't even get my kids to listen to me and to respect me. So discipline isn't mean. It's not being mean. It's actually a loving process. After trusting God, teaching obedience was at the top of Moses's agenda for the people of God. And it's my opinion that it has to be at the top of our to-do list too, because it can really be a nightmare if your kids don't respect or obey you. I have changed my thinking about discipline over the years. And I now believe that we can each find an approach to discipline that is just right for our family, whether or not it fits with what the experts say or it doesn't. And so I'm going to give you a few principles here of how I think we can successfully respond to disobedience. But these are just for you to consider. I don't know you. I don't know your family, your kids, your circumstances, your history. So you want to take all of that into account as you consider what I'm going to say. Okay. Let's see. It didn't want to go. There we go. Okay. So first, I want to say that I believe as parents, we deserve respect. Not because we are always great, we're always patient, we never make mistakes, we're always perfect role models, but because of our roles as parents. So that I think becomes a challenge for people sometimes. We think, oh, well, I can't, for example, I can't expect my kids to do their chores when I ask them to if I am not always doing my chores. I don't agree with that because I think if we get into that mindset, then we're never going to get our kids' honoring, respectful behavior. So, in contrast to disobedience, I believe that we should respond immediately to disrespect and not just let it go. So, what's the difference between disobedience and disrespect? If I let's say I say to my son, I would like you to unload the dishwasher now. If my son says, no, no, I'm playing a game right now. Stop, mom, leave me alone. I'm playing this game. That is disrespect. It isn't honoring me and my role as authority in our relationship. If I were to say, I would like you to unload the dishwasher, and my son says, okay, and then I come back an hour later and it's not done, that would be disobedience. Probably it wouldn't be willful disobedience. Probably, my child just got distracted and didn't do it. And so the way that we respond depends on what type of behavior it was. If it was the disrespectful one, I want to immediately respond, even if all I do is say, that was disrespectful. Please restate that in a respectful way. And you want to teach your kids how to do that. There is a way of having kids say in a respectful way that they would like to wait. So, for example, my son might say, Mom, I know you want me to unload the dishwasher right now, but would it be okay if I finish this level of the game? And knowing my kids as I do, when they're playing video games, that means I have to say, okay, that's fine, but that needs to be wrapped up in 10 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever that is. Okay. That would be a response to disrespect. We don't want to ignore it, because if we ignore disrespect, in my opinion and experience, it will get worse and worse and worse. Okay. So what if it's just straight up disobedience? Um, so let's say my son did not unload the dishwasher as I asked him to, but he wasn't disrespectful. And he doesn't provide me with any alternative explanation, because there are many times alternative explanations for why our kids don't do something that we ask them to do, right? So, for example, my son might say, I was going to unload the dishwasher, but dad asked me to come help him load boxes into the garage. And then I would say, oh, okay, sure, no problem. But let's say that you know that your child just didn't do something that you asked them to do, and it was willful, it was intentional, or it's a repeated problem. Then, as an option for dealing with that disobedience, is many times what we have as parents struggle with when it comes to discipline is knowing what we should do. What should we do in response to disobedience? And I love the suggestion of Dr. Kevin Leman in his book, Have a New Kid by Friday, where he says that we can deny the next request. So instead of us trying to figure out, well, what would really make an impact on my child? What do they really, really value that I could remove as a consequence for their disobedience? Instead of racking our brains on that, we just wait until our child comes to us and says, hey, can I go over to the neighbor's house to play basketball? Hey, can I stay up late tonight? Hey, can I have an extra dessert? Then the answer will be no. The answer will be no. Now, I'm going to give a caveat here and say that if it's something like if you deny your child this, it will be written up in a scathing biography of you when your kids grow up, then don't choose that. I'm talking about something very relatively minor, as the examples that I just gave. So um, In that case, you could say, no, you may not go over to the neighbors to play basketball. Your child will likely say, no, why? Why? Then you will say, remember when I asked you to unload the dishwasher? In that case, your child will probably say, oh, I'll do it right now. And then you can say, great, that would be wonderful. I would love for you to do that. But the answer is still going to be no. If your child pitches a fit, then that is when you ignore it, not when your child's being disrespectful. And your child will learn relatively quickly that they need to do what you ask them to do. Again, all of this is focused on your individual circumstances. You get to be the arbiter of whether or not your child deserves some kind of consequence for that behavior. But I would not ignore disobedience over and over and over either. Okay, another option for dealing with disobedience is to promise a consequence later. So many times I would be out with my kids, and that is when they would choose to be disobedient, having bad behavior, and I'm out in public and I'm struggling to try to think of what I can do to let them know that they're in trouble. And so what I started doing was to say, okay, this is what you did. And I am going to think about what would be an appropriate consequence. I'm going to pray about it. I'm going to talk to your dad about it. But I can promise you that whatever it is, you won't like it. And simply saying that is a consequence for the bad behavior in the short term. Typically, we want to give consequences as close as possible to the disobedience. I know that goes against what I just said about denying the next request. So, but I like that if we're in a situation where we can't come up with something, but we want an immediate response, we can say, I'm going to give you a consequence later on. What I liked to do, and I think this is a good potential response, is to come up with a logical consequence. Much of the time for me, that was you took my time by your behavior, by your disobedience. And so now the consequence is that you're going to do some of my work around the house because you took up so much of my time. And that tended to work quite well. Okay, so having respectful, generally obedient children will save your sanity. My children were not perfectly obedient, and I actually think that is better. I am working on a book on this topic based on a very popular talk that I give on this very issue. So if you follow me, you can find out about that book when it is available. So after teaching the Israelites to obey, they had to be taught to love their neighbor. People problems plagued the Israelites. There were issues of jealousy, marital problems, and our kids get to practice on their siblings, their cousins, and their friends. And you can see that picture was a picture of my two boys. It's one of my very favorite pictures. One thing that we can do is we can study the Bible together. There's a book called Character Training for Families that I just love. We would do that together at meal times. Have rules for communication. So one of the things that we did as a family is we signed a kindness contract where we agreed not to say things that were very, very upsetting to one another. And if we violated the contract, the other person would say, "What did you say?" as a reminder. And then we would appropriately respond with, "I'm sorry, what I meant to say was." Um, and that did help with sibling rivalry and the relationships between my kids. But I would say these next couple of things helped even more, and that is we had individual time with our kids. What I did just to save my own sanity is I assigned each of my kids a day of the week in birth order. So my oldest day was Monday all the way through Saturday. And that solved a lot of conflict because if the kids were arguing over something, the child whose day it was got to decide. They got to have the best seat in the car. They got to have the best blanket and the best seat on the couch when we were doing school. But beyond that, it meant that we would also have a special time between me and that child doing whatever it is that they wanted to do with me for like 15 minutes. And that is the time that I could say to the kids, tell me about how things are going with your siblings right now. And that goes a long, long way toward helping kids feel loved and respected. We also want to be intentional about teaching social and emotional skills. I do entire sessions on some of these skills, and I found that parents were asking me over and over, I need a resource. I need help with teaching my kids these skills. And I didn't have anything that I could direct them toward. So I created a curriculum called Training Aliens. The idea behind it is that there are these alien siblings at space camp who don't know our social and emotional skills. They don't know what they're doing. And there are short, funny stories about their difficulties and challenges at space camp. NASA has asked the camp attendees to teach these alien social and emotional skills. And so the curriculum comes along with a video course where I teach kids in a child-friendly video, just a 5 minute or shorter video, the skill, and then they can train the aliens in how to use it. And they also have all kinds of activities that they can use to practice the skill. And kids are having so much fun with this. They don't even think at school. They're inviting their friends over to do these activities with them. And I highly commend it to you. It does come in both a secular and a faith-based version. We want to model loving others in our marriage as well. A lot of times, newer homeschoolers think that the biggest risk of for their homeschooling and their ability to continue is like homeschool haters. We're going to turn them in and have the officials come in and take their kids away. But actually, the number one risk to homeschooling is divorce. And in fact, like most of the time when homeschool records get drug into court, it's because of a divorce and a spouse saying, oh, she's not really homeschooling, and you need to look at her records. We want to make time. If we are married, we want to make sure that we have some time devoted to marriage. I'm not saying that we have to go out on dates, even if we just have uninterrupted time alone together where we're strengthening the marriage, that can make all the difference. So, to achieve homeschool sanity, we've covered trust God, discipline, and teach your kids to love their neighbor. The next simple step is to create routines. The Israelites had to learn daily and weekly routines in order to survive in the wilderness. I thought I was going to have to give up homeschooling because I wasn't actually homeschooling my preschooler. That's when I decided to start homeschooling. I thought homeschooling preschool would be a great test case, but my house was a mess. My husband wasn't happy. I thought I had to quit. I thought I had to stop having kids. But then I found a woman who called herself Fly Lady, and she taught me the power of routines. I started using routines instead of just like going to bed whenever I felt like it, getting up whenever, and doing things just willy-nilly. Like I kept mentioning the dishwasher. My dishwasher was either full of dirty dishes or clean dishes, and it would get run sometimes during the day, at night, whenever. But when I started running it every night and making sure that my kitchen was cleaned up and I had no dirty dishes in the sink, there was something about it that the next day, besides my kids being able to help me unload it, I felt like things were under control. And it really changed my life. It gave me confidence that I could homeschool. And my husband was confident that I could handle more kids and homeschool. And for years, I went on just using routines and doing the little 15-minute missions that Fly Lady would give me. But I started wishing that I had some 15-minute missions that would help me organize as a homeschooling mom. So for many years, I would think, oh, I want to sell my used curriculum. But by the time I would think of it, the used sales were already done. And so one day, I thought, you know what? I'm going to make a list of all the areas of my homeschooling life that I want organization in. And then I broke each of those down into 15-minute missions that you could do um, every weekday besides reading the mission, or an hour on the weekend. And the result is the book, The Organized Homeschool Life, that can help you get some order into your life and feel a sense of mastery. And then, because some moms would tell me, how am I supposed to find 15 minutes to organize every day? I created the planner, because what I found that I was doing and other homeschool moms were doing is thinking of organization as an event. Like somehow my husband was going to take all of my kids out of the house for 2 weeks in the summer so I could get organized. Of course, that never happened. And even when it did happen, that I had a long chunk of time to organize things, of course, everything would fall apart like immediately. So organization has to be a habit. And this planner that I've created allows you to build that habit in a fun and rewarding way. So we've covered trust God, discipline, teach our kids to love others, and then create routines to overcome overwhelm. The next step in achieving homeschool sanity is to help kids remember. When we are choosing curriculum, we want to choose resources that help kids remember the main information. So your math facts, your grammar, if you're a faith-based homeschooler, some of your scripture verses that are key to your faith. And so the things, and there are more than these, but the top three things that I think can help our kids to remember what they're learning are pictures, games, and stories. So with pictures, we started using an app called Memlock. There's no C in lock, Memlock. And it uses these pictures to help us memorize scripture. And it made a huge difference for me finally being able to memorize scripture and my kids as well. Um, so we can use pictures. There are picture resources out there that can be used to teach math facts, vocabulary, that I love. So I commend you to looking for those kinds of resources. But then games are such a great way to teach facts. If your curriculum doesn't include them, add them. So we have online games, we have board games. One of the things that has always stayed with me is when I, as a brand new homeschooler, attended a local session with veteran homeschoolers, and they were asked, what do you wish you would have done differently? They all said they wish they would have spent more time playing games because they are very, very powerful. And at the end here, I'm going to give you a URL where you can find some of these games that I've made lists of, including the ultimate list of free grammar games. The Israelites told stories of God's deliverance to help them remember. So I discovered one day after one of my sons offered to pay me not to teach him grammar, that one potential reason that my son and so many other kids just hated grammar is because it was completely taken out of the context of story, which is the very best part of language arts. And long story short, I started wondering what would happen if I created not just a grammar curriculum, but a complete language arts curriculum that used stories to teach these concepts in a very memorable way. So, as an example, in a traditional English curriculum or a grammar curriculum, your student will be told a noun is a person, place, or thing. Find all the nouns in these random sentences that have no relationship to where your child is at or to any story that they're aware of. In Grammar Galaxy, what happens is the nouns are abducted from planet sentence where they live. And as a result, they begin disappearing from planet English where the people live. And the king of the galaxy discovers that this is what has happened, that the gremlin, the enemy of the galaxy, has arranged for this to happen. So he has them brought back to planet Sentence where they live, but now they have to be guided back to the streets where they live. And where do they live? They live on Person, Place, or Thing Street. And so the king's children, the royal English children, have so much work to do getting all these words back to the streets where they live that they have to ask other kids in the galaxy to be fellow guardians of the galaxy and to do that work for them. And that is how this curriculum works. And kids definitely love it and they remember. So, homeschool sanity also comes from helping our kids remember. And then the last simple step that I want to share today is to have celebrations. God instituted many lengthy celebrations, and my kids enjoy these. And the truth is, they remember them the most out of everything that we did. So we did do that Konos study on kings and queens, and you can see in the picture there we had a celebration, a medieval feast. We actually had two of them, but we would involve family members and friends. We had friends who happened to be in town with their young boys when we were doing this medieval feast, and I dressed them up, invited them to come, and they loved it so much that they decided to start homeschooling themselves. Once we had, my oldest son wanted to have a 100 days of school party, and he planned the entire thing and absolutely loved it. When we studied Africa, we invited family to participate in an Africa party. We happened to have a family member who is a mammal curator who has been to Africa on safari many times. And so he came and did a whole presentation for us. So much fun, so memorable. And then what we would also do is to unschool at least part of the time, even if that just means that you go on rabbit trails and you put the books down and you allow your kids' interest to take them where they want to go and just enjoy it. And as I said at the beginning, um, oh my goodness, the memories that we have as a family and the fruit of that that we have seen in our family, both with our kids' success academically, in their careers, in their personal lives. They all have such rich hobbies and they share them with us. And we have such wonderful and close relationships as a result. So let's review. We can banish overwhelm and get to the homeschool promised land by trusting God, by disciplining appropriately, teaching our kids to love their neighbor, creating routines, helping them remember what we teach them by choosing curriculum that includes pictures, games, and stories, and by planning celebrations that bring us joy. That's the homeschool promised land for me, a family who loves God and one another. So I mentioned my neighbor at the beginning of the talk, who was going to put her kids back in school, even while the pandemic was still going on. And she contacted me and told me that online school was a disaster. So she wanted to know about homeschooling again. And so I talked with her, and just 2 weeks into it, she talked to me again and she just gushed about how it had changed her life. In fact, she found herself feeling not thankful for the pandemic, but thankful that the pandemic had led her to it. And she was so confident that this was the right choice for her family at that time. And that is the confidence that I would love for you to have as well. And I believe that you can have more of it with the simple steps that I have shared with you today. So, this is the URL where you can find many of the resources I have mentioned, homeschoolsanity.com/global. You can find samples, you can find games. I also offer language arts games every month that go to my subscribers, so you can get access to those as well. Well, thank you so much for having me share with you today.
Well, thank you, Dr. Melanie. That was absolutely a fantastic session. I got some just great tips. I'm writing all this stuff down. Like, wow, I'm going to try that. That's terrific. And I love your passion for homeschooling and everything that you're doing. All of us parents, we can either learn by the mistakes or what works for others, or learn by our own mistakes. And it's way cheaper to learn from the things that work, and a lot less
Right.
frustrating as well. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now, did you drop some links and everything? It looks like Dennis did for you. There you go. That'll be great. And if anybody wants to reach out with Dr. Melanie, or have Dr. Melanie reach out with you, go ahead and put your name, say Dr. Melanie, and then your email in the chat. Your name, Dr. Melanie, and your email in the chat. And don't forget to save this chat. Dr. Melanie, I want to have you back. This is our very first pilot session into homeschooling. We're so fired up about this whole community. And I think I'm not sure if you were on earlier, but most of our team are homeschooling parents. And we have a passion for it, just the incredible work that it does. And it's it's kind of like just getting 1 degree of change, 2 degrees. Just get, if we could only pour it out into the rest of the world of just that love and caring enough for your children to kind of own that stewardship that God gives you. We have responsibility there. And so many times we just quickly pawn it off. It's like, oh, they're the professionals, we'll send them over there. And you don't know who they are or what they're teaching or anything else. But God bless you, and thank you for
Thank you.
coming on. I think you're really going to enjoy Dr. Monica Hinton and Elizabeth Ellsworth as they come up a little bit later. You guys are going to have a lot in common. But thank you so much, and make sure everybody changes that and saves that chat. Excuse me, and we will get back with you. Thank you so much, Doc. I appreciate it.